we begin the session now. And you all have bio of Mathew. I will quickly read the important portions of that. He's co-head of Insight and Foresight at Kinetic Cafe, an innovation firm and startup accelerator located in Toronto. He specializes in developing and applied design research and strategic foresight methods to the fuzzy front of innovation. Over the past 10 years, he's worked with some very well-known companies: TD Bank, PepsiCo, Samsung, Motorola, Whirlpool, SmartTech, Liberty Mutual, Recycle, Evergreen, Bigwork, and Aliva. The last two are social ventures. In addition to working with incumbent organizations, he's also helped venture-backed startups like BuckTalk, Interaxon, and PlayLab. Mathew also works frequently with startups and commercialization offices at a number of Canadian universities in areas of strategic visioning and pre-competitive intellectual property expansion. He's a guest faculty at leading universities, including OCADU, MIT, and University of Waterloo. We have missed us a very rare talent in Foresight and Insight area. And he's with a very, very innovative company, and this was a rare find. Please help me welcome Mathew to begin the session.
Good evening, everyone. Very happy to be here and honored to be invited as well. I've really enjoyed over my time working in this area, especially working with entrepreneurs, startup companies, and people from universities at the cutting edge of technology and fundamental science and research. I'm going to give a nice short presentation today, but I might actually draw it out a little bit longer and try and share some of my experiences from the field doing the work that I do, talk a bit about myself and my background, how we apply the tools that I've sort of developed over the last several years to projects with companies, some of them strictly for-profit, some of them social enterprises as well. I'm going to give you a couple anecdotal stories also about local social enterprises or B Corps that I've interacted with or worked with or purchased products from. And hopefully also talk a little bit more clearly about how we approach values and value propositions when we do our work. So yeah, I'll get into that. And I also encourage you to interrupt me at any time and ask questions. I like an interactive session. I don't always like to sort of preach from a pulpit, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna. So we're all right. Good. I'm gonna talk about segmentation today a little bit. I'm gonna try and weave the story of segmentation through most of my presentation about value proposition. And again, like I said, I'm going to try and introduce our perspective on that. I don't come from a hardcore marketing background. I come from a industrial design background, and before that I was a graffiti artist. So it's kind of an odd beginnings, but I've sort of managed to maneuver myself into this position where I get to work with really big companies and help them think about their futures. I put photos like this up. This is actually something we're talking about right now. I was at this graffiti jam this summer called Under Pressure. It happens in Montreal every year. It was their 20th anniversary. Well, they're not explicitly a social enterprise. They are, a community-driven, community sort of built grassroots kind of cultural event that does employ a number of people and actually foster a lot of support for the arts locally and also internationally by bringing artists to Montreal, Canada, once a year to sort of participate in this venue. When I was walking around there, I go to these things not just out of my own personal interest because I like the culture, but also to sort of document what I see, because that's a big part of my work, is to understand what are the sort of types of people that are visiting these types of events, what are their sort of conversations they're having, what is it they're doing while they're there, and what are they interested in also, and why. Interestingly, this gentleman pulled up in his canary yellow lowrider. took the spotlight or took the attention away from the graffiti artist painting momentarily and actually for quite some time while he was there hanging out. And maybe as an image of segmentation and a certain kind of value proposition that this guy brought to the scene there that day. You can tell by the sort of image here that a lot of people were captivated or compelled to approach and take in the sort of spectacle that he had created of himself and sort of the sort of street scene there, but also sort of just to sort of appreciate the value of a restored classic car, possibly within the context, within the cultural context of sort of urban street culture, whatever you'd like to call it, within that context and its association to sort of graffiti art, an interesting kind of marker. So that's my Twitter handle. That's some shameless self-promotion. I don't have a lot of followers, and I don't trust people that typically have more than 1,000 followers. You'll find them kind of odd. I'll say these kind of things. I don't 100% meet them all the time, but I like to follow some interesting people also on Twitter. And if you want to follow me, that's great, and I'll follow you. I started at OCAD. I'm going to just give you a quick background on who I am so you understand why I'm going to say some things I do. I started at OCAD and I took industrial design, which was an interesting educational background because you do learn a lot about it. You learn about marketing, you learn about design research and how to understand what people's needs are and how to actually satisfy those needs by designing a product or a service or a system that addresses that. You do a lot of hands-on model making, you do a lot of prototyping, you do a lot of rapid iteration, and you do a lot of storytelling and sort of communication to people. While I was there, I also worked at a place, a think tank called the Institute for Strategic Creativity. This is a very interesting place. It really allowed us to sharpen a lot of skills, especially in the strategic foresight space, but also to sort of work with a team of people that are very behavior-centric. So we always had this model of understanding the alignment between behavior, technology, and organizations. And that was the understanding of, what is the motivation, what is the possibility or capability, and how can that be enabled in some way through, the efforts or capacities of an organization. Spent a lot of time exploring very interesting and odd subjects. Apart from doing very in-depth studies of sort of fundamental scientific research at organizations like DARPA and university labs around the world that were actually funded or sponsored by them, I also spent a great deal of time exploring the world of Second Life when it came out, my Second Life. And this was my avatar, Runny Revolution. And I would go into Second Life, painting art in the real world, bringing my virtual art into my art into the virtual space, and put up these installations in people's retail environments. And what I was doing was on twofold. I was using it as a provocation to start conversations about their values, their expectations, their behaviors occurring within this virtual environment. And what was interesting to me was that people would become very frustrated or reveal things to you about this virtual world that were essentially directly mapping real-world behaviors, real-world values, and expectations into a virtual space. And you might be confused by that and say, well, this is a virtual world, a lot of things can happen here that don't necessarily have to happen in the real world, or you don't need to necessarily pack those bags and bring them there with you, but they do, that's behavior. Understanding who people are, how they think, what they do, and how they use tools, or how they use environments or systems and platforms in order to sort of achieve something is, at the core of what I do. And it's whether that's anticipating how they're going to use something that doesn't yet exist, or actually fundamentally just studying something that does exist and understanding the behaviors behind it. After I left the Beale Institute, I spent some time at an organization called Educature. They're a global agency now. We helped develop a lot of sort of research methodologies there, foresight practices, and we had a lot of experience working with multinational corporations, doing various kinds of segmented research. Primarily, one of the big segments we focused on there was millennials, and I'd be happy to share conversations about that on the side, about working with organizations like PepsiCo Global, Campbell's, Diageo, those sorts of organizations, about identifying sort of how to make value propositions or to communicate and connect with segments like the millennial segment, or in some cases, mothers, insurance buyers at different ages, etc. I'm currently now at Kinetic Cafe. What's different about us, I like to put up the startup thing, and this is why I'm really happy to be here also, is that we work with startup companies there. So we're part consulting, part investment firm, part digital lab, and we kind of mix these three things together. And we work with startup companies, but we also have digital lab and software engineers that help us build things. And then we have a couple of weirdos like me and some other very well-seasoned business and entrepreneurs on staff or the founders who bring their expertise and experience to the table. Have a look. We have a startup program that we launched a couple of weeks back called Fresh Startups, and it's a partnership with Fresh, the food chain, and we're encouraging sort of startups in the health, wellness, and food space to sort of interact and participate in that at some level, although I think the applications might be wrapping up shortly. Okay. So I've got 3 diagrams that I'll put up, and we'll probably go back to these as part of a worksheet later, but the rest of my presentation, I promise you, is filled with very interesting, colorful pictures that I've either taken from the internet without permission or have taken myself while traveling the world. The business model canvas, which we're all familiar with, I'm going to be talking primarily today about the value proposition aspect to that. And one thing I wanted to point out about this is that there is a number of criteria listed underneath the value proposition cell in this model. Newness, cost-benefit ratio, these types of things. I agree with all of these fundamentally. We also, but what you'll notice today is that I'm going to talk about other sort of criteria, let's say, or qualifiers within what I think is sort of the value proposition space. And some of them might be a little bit more broad in general, and I think a few might be a little bit more specific. I'd also like to talk about this. I came across this the other day while preparing for this presentation, actually. It's called Common Cause is the organization, and they have a really interesting body of research on universal values, value frameworks, models. This was on their site. It's by this fellow S.H. Schwartz. I'm sure you could look that up also. But it really resonates with me and some of the work that we've done over time. And not just talking about the way people have been traditionally possibly segmented in terms of the amount of disposable income in their wallets, the geographies they live in, their gender, those kind of things. But this idea of universal values and value, how that's sort of mapped onto products, services, systems, and how products, service systems, businesses can actually align with or understand these values at some level and position their products accordingly to speak to people that actually believe in these things as well. And these are sort of known as universal values that most everyone shares at some level. So it would take some time to kind of soak those in. At some level or another, everyone's got a product or service that helps them be and become something within this. And again, I'd encourage you to take a closer look at that. As I said, I didn't develop this campaign for Pepsi by any means, but we had a lot of experience kind of working with an organization like that. And, at some level, if you go back to this sort of idea of, back here about some of these dimensions, self-transcendence, conservation, self-enhancement, every organization picks not only a value proposition, but a way of messaging that or positioning that to the customer, to the end user, or to the public at large. And on some level, very fun is at the core of the Pepsi brand. It's their big fun and entertainment. The messaging here in terms of Live for Now as part of this campaign, it makes a lot of assumptions and sort of connects with, on some levels, this idea that millennials just want to live for now and they're thinking about the future. Correct or incorrect? I'm not too sure, but I've got a hunch that it's not as correct as they might think it is. And it kind of is a sort of a challenge to say, this is the way that messaging and products are being positioned towards a certain generation, a certain segment of our society, and are they really like that? Are they really considering, just looking at themselves and living in the moment, living for now, forgetting what is tomorrow and what is their contribution to tomorrow? A different kind of value proposition and a different segment altogether. Well, same segment, different value proposition, different type of people. I was just recently visiting a school called the Chaos Pilots in Denmark, and I also encourage you to look them up if you're interested in post-secondary education, alternative business schools. And they do a really good job of mixing kind of social enterprise, leadership skills, business school trainings, and design thinking approaches, or a sort of more empathetic approach to say, entrepreneurship, leadership, and business. And it's a very small school, but these types of people are extremely motivated to become leaders, change makers, social entrepreneurs, and the diversity of projects that they work on there is completely different. And the way that the school messages that to prospective students is very clever, and they actually use a lot of sort of first-hand stories and sort of in very interesting events to sort of communicate that to potential students. This is part of the typical kind of breakdown, and I'm sure you guys have thought of this at some level with your businesses, but in every sort of project that we run, we're sort of confronted by or presented the challenge of who is the customer, what is their problem or need, and in most cases the language that's used is tell us about their unmet needs, their unarticulated needs, what is the solution that we're going to present to them, and how is that solution different from the competition? When we're talking about a value proposition, this is essentially the major breakdown of that in a lot of ways. And understanding who is the customer is really fundamentally part is my job. When I go out into the field and do my work, my job is to learn about the customer and bring that information back to our clients or back to the table and say, this is the customer, these are the problems that they have, these are their needs, and this is the solution that I envision we can present to them based on that. And understanding that from an entrepreneur's point of view or a startup point of view is the same as it is for a large corporation. Possibly there's a different level of investment and risk maybe at play, but it's really the same for a large business and a small business. And some companies want to understand how to make an incremental change to a product category. Some companies want to invent an entirely new category. As an entrepreneur, you might be trying to create a market for your product, not even create a product itself, but create a market, which might be more difficult. Who are the customers that make up that market? And talk about the values context. This is kind of where I do my little sort of applied foresight pitch. Not only when we're working with companies, asking them about how can we help you invent products for next year, 1 to 3 year timelines, where they're looking to sort of get a new iteration of a certain product or service out into the market. We also like to sort of help them think ahead. And as an entrepreneur or sort of a socially minded group, you might also want to sort of look around and consider these types of things. And a very common acronym that's floating around right now. I first heard it from this man named Bob Johansson from the Institute for the Future, and also from the Brand Corporation, who does a lot of talking about applied foresight or strategic foresight. It's VUCA, and it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And if we think about the context of values and value proposition within this world that, even Drucker was talking about discontinuous change some time ago, we now sort of are maybe being becoming more aware of this, or becoming presented this in a more sort of neatly packaged way, or indirectly or directly via the media. And if we're all familiar, I'm not laughing at it, natural disasters and sort of the increasing sort of impact that they're having on us, whether that's through the media or whether that's the reality. We're seeing a number of interesting kind of propositions popping up in the market based on this context of volatility and uncertainty, and how they align with people's sort of expectations and assumptions or fears for how we create products and how we create value. Yeah.
What does VUC stand for?
Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And what we're seeing is basically right now, if you look at, from a social point of view, if you look at increasing populations, you look at global warming, whether we want to believe it or not, I believe it. We're seeing increasingly disruptive weather patterns. We're seeing increasing conflict because of fighting over resources or land or whatever, what have you. There's there's lack of predictability in the financial markets. In a lot of ways, the system is gamed, but it's not gamed, there's glitches. There's a number of things like occurring. Not that this world wasn't complex before, and it wasn't maybe as uncertain before when people were maybe had a tighter grip on things. These are the contexts, like when we acknowledge this and sort of enter our work from this perspective, understanding that people might be more aware of or more anxious because of this uncertain, complex, and ambiguous context. And we want to help them understand it, we want to help them navigate it, and we also want to help them live their lives and actualize within it. So someone who's very cleverly put this classic card together, and this is nothing new, this has been around for millennia, but the positioning, the messaging here is that this will help you, simply and efficiently escape a disaster zone with some of your possessions and belongings. Again, there's a value proposition being made there within the context of, we all know that the world is becoming maybe a more unpredictable place, and should I go down to Home Depot or somewhere and buy the kit for this tomorrow, just in case? I put up this other acronym also, UDA. Are you guys familiar with that? It stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And these are again this comes from the Air Force. This is sort of a military colonel in the Air Force developed this as a way of training pilots to deal with very fast-moving situations.
How's that again?
Observe, orient, decide, and act. And the image here is this H35 heads-up display. I always like to put this in my presentations because it also sort of signifies or shows you that this is where we're moving the technology in terms of sensing, in terms of integration, in terms of collaboration. These are the things that we do in our job. We are, I'm not saying this is me, but we're trying to understand how we plug in the systems, how we connect with others, how we see the world around us, and how we use information from multiple sources to make a decision and act on that decision. And these kinds of displays and this kind of technology is developed for that, but sort of the lesson I try to draw is that you have these capabilities and these tools, maybe not as scary looking as this, but your laptop and some good conversational techniques will help you observe, orient, decide, and act. There's two more pieces of it. Speed. We're moving very fast. Someone could move in and develop the technology that you're working on, sooner than you think. We talk a lot about fortressing in the intellectual property space, fortressing patents. As soon as the patent's published, there's a lag between the filing of it and everything, and making to market or commercialization possibly that technology. But people are fast now. It's we see all these technologies and things that are signifiers of that, but we're also able to learn very quickly, and we're also able to apply these lessons very quickly now also. And in your context as an entrepreneur, how fast can you learn, and how fast can you decide to apply the lessons that you sort of acquired from the world about a specific segment, a target customer, and how to adjust that value proposition towards them. And then change, the disruptive change, the events that happen that sort of cause values and the value proposition to shift. When Fukushima happened, almost overnight, literally overnight, people started throwing in the towel on nuclear energy. And it all of a sudden created a very interesting space for green tech, for other models of energy creation and consumption. And we monitor these things and we look at them very closely, not just as researchers or as consultants, but also as entrepreneurs. If you're entrepreneurial minded, you're looking for how events are triggering shifts in behavior and shifts in value, and how people perceive value. Do I perceive the value of nuclear energy different after that? Of course I do. I completely, in Canada as a taxpayer right now, I'll reveal a bit about my political leanings, but I'm not really interested in supporting increased investments in nuclear energy just because of the sort of risks that are associated with it and the costs. But when events like that happen, it triggers maybe a spike in the shift or a rapid change in certain types of value. And how do you capture that or align with it as an organization or as an entrepreneur? This is really interesting. This is an MIT Media Lab project. It's called the Copenhagen Wheel. And this bicycle bikes around the city and collects data about the air quality, about the speed that the bicycle is traveling at, maps all out in real time in GPS. Very interesting sort of, piece of technology that sort of aligns also with this idea of cycling and people as sensors in the environment. And I use the word like relevance there. And what most businesses, most of the projects that we've worked on, again, whether it's an incremental product, a product that's trying to enter a certain part of the market, or disruptive change, or defining new categories, or refining a value proposition and messaging for a company, it's really about relevance and how do you find that relevance as a business, and understanding what people's values and expectations are, and providing them with sort of the means to sort of achieve that in some way. So here's some more straightforward stuff. How do we define a value proposition or values? I always put values there because I don't like the idea of just marketers won't like this, but I don't like the idea of just one value proposition, but I think that's kind of what everyone's trying to get at all the time. But I think value proposition is something that's wrapped in values. That's the way we sort of do our work. Our three-step process to doing this is understanding the customer and market context, very straightforward. I'll explain a bit about that. Aligning internal and external actions, so the internal actions of an organization with the outward-facing actions of the product or the organization itself, and creating and communicating that value, like really creating and communicating that value. I threw in this picture of a BlackBerry. I hope there's no former BlackBerry employees here, or if there are, well, I think there's something to be said about the lack of foresight that an organization like that might have had. It's been criticized in the media quite a bit, but I'm not here to criticize it. I'm just here to basically say that there was a misalignment possibly of value and values and the inability to be relevant, and that's very obvious. But we're seeing the effects of an organization cannot sort of adjust its value proposition to changing times and either anticipate that in advance to make the investments required to do that, or just being flat out, denying that those changes were occurring around them. And we can see the results of that. That's an organization kind of on the way down. An organization's on the way up. If we're talking about social entrepreneurship, I was on Indiegogo. How many of you guys visit Indiegogo or Kickstarter? Like, you visit that frequently? Yeah, it's awesome. I think that's one of the best places, honestly, to look at how people are forming value propositions, communicating those. You see them making it and breaking it. You see the projects that are overfunded, and you see the projects that don't have a dime. And if you think about a really fast, cheap way to test out your value proposition or your product, start an Indiegogo campaign or a Kickstarter campaign and see what happens. If you're willing to sort of put that out there, you'll get some really honest feedback from the market, both in terms of dollars and cents, and also in terms of all the smart people out there on the internet that have their 2 cents to throw in. This was a really interesting one, though. It was a campaign for local power, and this is kind of aligned with some of the ideas of the social entrepreneurship today. And they'd sort of done a number of studies, and they had realized that their energy company, the local energy company, was not providing them the best value for the energy that they were buying as citizens, as taxpayers in that district. And they decided to sort of campaign to have that switch, so they could own the energy themselves and produce it or source it from more sustainable places, and not just from this one provider who had essentially a monopoly on the market. When the people revolt, which is kind of what happened, the company itself, instead of trying to adjust their own value proposition and move in that way, it just pumped a bunch of money into lobbying against them, which kind of did backfire. They just garnered a lot more support for their cause, and as you can see, put them all over their fundraising goal for their next campaign. This is something I think is very interesting, is the shift again towards community empowerment, this idea of shared values, the articulation of values, and then the ability to act on those. So again, if the market's not satisfying the need, the consumers are able, obviously, now to go out and find these things on their own and do it themselves. So it's something, it's a little different being an entrepreneur on this side of the fence, but you know, if you're from a large incumbent organization, it's, you know, recommended that you sort of pay attention to these kinds of things and figure out how to make money with them. Another really interesting sort of segment, which I think is also very socially innovative. We all know that there's sort of this deficit, and you know, I don't like to talk too much about gender and gender breakdowns, but we know that there's a real big gap in the science and engineering, especially with girls. And the typical way we see, you know, products being marketed is towards boys, you know, in that space. And you know, and that's sort of like, it's interesting that this had to become a need of this nature, and it was a business that actually became extremely viable and has had a lot of success. And you know, in a lot of ways, I think it's fantastic that they've, you know, addressed that segment and sort of, you know, decided to sort of create these products for, you know, specifically for girls and specifically, you know, that segment. But at the same time, it's kind of a shame also that they had to do that in the first place. But you know, we get there. But this lady really recognized that there was a customer need, you know, from that perspective, and aligned her own actions, you know, in terms of creating this product, wrapping it up in a narrative, in a value proposition, and creating and communicating that value to the world around her through this vehicle, through this medium of Kickstarter, you know, through a number of sort of hands-on type workshops as well. You know, and obviously the success is far beyond this now, but it's there. That was a lot of fun. So my research, understanding the customer context and market context, I'll talk a bit about that. Coming from a design background, when we talk about empathy, we talk about voice of the customer. My job is to really connect the voice of the customer with the organization, small or large. This is a picture I took in Moscow when I was doing research. I believe it was for either PepsiCo or Diageo. It was related to millennials and consumption of this and that. I won't get into details on the microphone, but it says this translates essentially into stop drinking, start training. I take pictures of graffiti and street art quite a bit in my work because I find that some of the messages conveyed, especially through street media, are you know, very punchy and poignant, but they're also indicative or related to broader social sentiments that I'd like to probe deeper into when I have conversations at the bar with kids later on. This is interesting to me because, you know, having worked for an alcohol and beverage company that was looking to market, you know, drinks towards millennials in some level, I would like to know what does this mean and why. So after taking that picture, I made sure to follow up in a conversation with some millennials in the bar and ask them about this sort of notion of stop drinking and start training and what did that relate to. They told me a sort of quick story. They just said, well, you know, here in Moscow, for Russia, we've got a very, you know, we have a problem with drinking, and we have our cultures, you know, we don't like binge drinking here, and it's a problem. And, you know, our generation started to realize that it's not really the way forward, and we don't want to be like our parents, we don't want to be like our older brothers, and we want to sort of be a little bit healthier maybe. Well, it's interesting. What does that mean? You know, how does that sort of affect how a message is formed, how we approach that segment in particular, and how we can sort of maybe capture also that behavior, that motivation in some way and do good. This is the way we like to break down value proposition, or we've always approached it from where I'm from. We talk a lot about being and becoming. This is from my Beal days and VOCAT days. A number of my colleagues and I used to talk about sort of the evolution of, you know, who you are now and who you want to become. You know, this is kind of an interesting approach. Instead of saying, you know, I'm positioning this to help you do that, it's asking someone who are they now, or learning about who they are now, and figuring out who they want to essentially become. And your value proposition, at some level, should help tell them or convince them either who they are now and who they want to become, or align with who they are now and help them become who they want to be. And what that boils down to for us is empowerment and participation. People want to be empowered, which is the ability to transform a choice or an opportunity into some kind of outcome. What is that choice they're facing, or what is the choice they want? And how can they transform that choice into an outcome? And how can they participate either in a class of society, a social group, a culture, in a movement, in something that's meaningful to them. A lot of people talk about, upward mobility or wanting to access, I want to become like I like fringe cultures and I want to be a part of that, but I'll work on the edge of it until I feel good enough confident enough to participate in there. And once I've learned what I've learned, everything for us boils down to this concept of empowerment and participation. How can your product, service, business empower somebody in a way that's relevant to them and allow them to participate? And maybe that's not participation directly in terms of my cell phone. I have a loaner phone right now, but my old cell phone, enabled me or empowered me to participate on social media while I'm moving around. It allowed me to read the paper while I was sitting on the bus or something. It allows me to participate in a number of different forums and things, all these different things. But I mean, that's not really, to me, that device, I don't value that device as much as I value my skateboard. And that's because my skateboard empowers me to do other things and participate in something else, which is physical activity. And it enables me to participate in the culture of skateboarding, which I've been part of for a long time, which is very meaningful to me. And it enables me to participate in this idea, which is the catch here, the bigger idea that I could have become a really great skateboarder. Kind of on the decline now, I'm 34 years old, so my knees and my ankles are pretty shot. But it enables me to participate in a culture that has more meaning to me than the cell phone essentially does. So some say, oh, well, the world's everyone's got cell phones, we're all connected, this, that, and the other. It doesn't really have that kind of meaning to me, and the value proposition of that is not the same as the value proposition of skateboard. That's the sort of aspiration, right? The unachievable aspiration. When we go out to learn about the market and the sort of customer context, the voice of the customer, we do a lot of situated research. So like you guys, for instance, with your cafe idea, I'm guessing you've been out and talked to a lot of artists and designers and performers and asked them about sort of where they go to perform or how they connect with people on that level and what do they prefer, what are their favorite places to go, what are the qualities and characteristics of those things. We call this we do a lot of this, what we call situated observation, immersion, and co-creation in our work. And that just involves us going on site and to the places where we're supposed to be connecting with people and actually learn from the conversation. We do our best also to kind of blend in. That's me on the left, that's my other partner, Sadie. And this is at Emily Carr University in Vancouver. And we were tasked for a project to learn about how to adjust, how to learn about what their student expectations, faculty expectations, and staff expectations were for a new campus development that they're doing right now. It's a large capital project to move their school campus to another location and to understand what could be essentially the experience there, but also the value proposition to incoming students, and how could we actually learn from existing students, staff, and faculty about their wants, needs, expectations, observe them using the space, observe how they sort of interacted with one another, and we use a variety of different techniques to do that, and everything from video work, like video capture booths, which is what we're sort of set up here to do that, where we have sort of a catcher, a primary catcher, and the actual interviewer, to sort of graffiti walls, like we were calling these town walls, and they had provocative statements on them, or questions that were meant to encourage or elicit feedback in the written form. Somewhere in here, when we piece all this together, between the conversation, the observation, the interaction, co-creation, is a value proposition that you can form, or that you can start to clarify a little bit more. This is a separate, different project, but what we do is when we collect all that stuff, we sort of map that alongside the feelings that the customer wants to have, and the sort of features that we think are going to trigger those feelings. Features maybe are visual cues, not necessarily like hard features in terms of hardware or interfaces, but features in terms of what you'll be able to do. How will this empower you? How will this enable you to participate in something? And we map those on together. You have any questions? Yeah.
I did value proposition before with a whole group of entrepreneurs, and it was very interesting because they had a really hard time at formulating the value proposition. Do you happen to have, I know there was a little formula where you had to state, like, what is your product? What problem are you solving? Are you going to get to that? Because I know that was a very useful exercise.
Yeah,
and
for sure. I mean,
again, it was very hard for people to formulate the responses in one sentence.
Yeah, it's always hard. I mean, that's why it's good to practice on Twitter. Yeah, I think the beginning there is like, identifying your customer. Who is this person? Like, what do they need? And, I'm not making fun of hipsters and millennials here, but a lot of people have, worked hard to, identify who is that customer. What is that person's need? What does this guy need right here? It's kind of funny. This is like, he needs a bike, actually. He needs a fixie bike to go with his outfit. But who is the customer? What is their need? What a problem that they're facing? And then how do you actually propose a solution to that? And the solution's not necessarily, we're not talking about describing the product. Maybe we start describing the product with the actual solution, but in that is somewhere in there is a value proposition. And I'll sort of move through a couple other examples that do that, I think, very well. Companies like this is a recent camera company, that's done a fairly good job of identifying that customer, the sort of millennial segment, let's say, or the sort of urban segment, and found sort of a way to align a product with a certain feature set to someone's self-image and identity, the personalities and roles that they occupy in their sort of social group or their society at large, and the life stage that they're at. We talk about segmentation, we talk about value proposition from that perspective also, where it's like, what life stage are we looking at in terms of our potential audience or potential consumer, target consumer, and what are the needs at that specific life stage? And then sort of the social and technological and political context that they also occupy. A camera like this will present a number of features and whatnot, but really, we also look at it, is it successful in terms of price? Yes, because it's not very powerful. Is there a cost return benefit on there? Yes, there probably is for that particular segment. The barriers to entry, they're fairly low because of the price, as well as the technical know-how to operate such a thing. The trade-offs that are made for that, and the sort of compromises that people have to make versus using a different kind of camera or a way of satisfying that. When I was traveling also, I like to bring up TiESep quite a bit because it's fairly topical right now, but also a very interesting example of value proposition that fits this sort of model of what is the behavior, the occasion, and the benefit. And here's a value proposition right here on the front page. It says 0 emissions, 0 compromises. And that kind of aligns with, creating a high-level promise at some level. It's creating a high-level promise. It's differentiating itself from its competitors in the sense that it is the most high-performing, potentially right now, the most high-performing electric car for someone who doesn't want to, wants to stand out in their social group and be kind of cool and have a fun car. And it aligns with these values possibly in a broader context of, let's not keep over-consuming in a certain way and demonstrate that we might be forward-looking and empower ourselves to sort of make a purchasing decision that's going to help transform the world a little bit. They just patented a 400-mile battery also, which is very interesting. GoPro as well. I've got a video here I'd like to play also. If you look at their value proposition, these aren't very socially, I wouldn't say this is like a social enterprise, but when they say the world's most versatile camera, wear it, mount it, love it, that's kind of like short form right there. Who is this speaking to though? Who is this communicating to? It's communicating to a group of people that are active, outdoorsy, kind of extroverted. They want to capture and share what they're up to with the rest of the world. They aspire to be like someone else, like an extreme sports athlete of some kind that's famous. They want to demonstrate that they've mastered a certain skill or that they're taking a certain risk in their lives. This camera enables them to do that, and they say it very clearly. not only do they say it, they demonstrate and communicate that value through media, videos. Fantastic. Okay, so they're promoting versatility, they're promoting, you know, all these things. Like the emotional platform that they've created out of that, you know, messaging or that product itself, in the way they've communicated that or sort of positioned it also to like the type of person that might or might not want to purchase that product is pretty clear, you know. And when you're creating a value proposition in this sense, looking at sort of how to figure out how what are the keywords, what are the key terms that connect to this idea of, you know, the product's features, the value that that's going to have in terms of connecting with a person's aspirations or how they're going to empower themselves and how they're going to participate in a culture, in a behavior, in a way that allows them to be who they want to be, but also become who they would like to become, is key, you know. And surrounding that value proposition with the right imaging and messaging is also critical. How do they enhance on that? They've added features. So when we talk about value propositions and look at products, we also want to figure out how is it going to be different than the competition, but also how can we enhance that and sort of add features to these things and build the emotional platforms around that, which is kind of what I just said. But this camera now has multiple different cameras that all connect with each other. You can set them up in a sort of way to record yourself from multiple angles and do all these things. They've built that in a way that, you know, does something that's propelled that company into success compared to another one, let's say like Flip Camera, that was not able to actually sort of not just create a value proposition, but align that value proposition with a specific market. If they had actually just figured out a way to mount this possibly to somebody, it might still be in the game competing as a fairly, you know, I wouldn't say a startup company, but as a startup company. Yeah, that's the end of that. I'll take more questions and we'll talk about the value proposition. You know, we can sort of work on help crafting one or two of them, where we have a sort of an opportunity to use some pen and paper and actually write out, you know, within this model, who is the customer, what is the need that you think they're facing, and sort of how that value proposition might form to satisfy that need. Again, like I like to encourage people to think about this idea of empowerment and participation. How does this value proposition convey an element of empowerment or choice to a consumer, and how that they can act upon that choice in order to become someone or something else at some level.
Yeah, I think that you can do a 10-minute breakout session of creating that.
Yeah, for sure. So does that sound like a plan? If you want to write some of this stuff down, and then we'll sort of have a group share, and we'll talk through them. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
You said earlier that you had been commissioned sometimes to create a market for a product. That piqued my interest.
Yeah.
Is that something that you recommend? How successful are people in creating a market for their product as opposed to a product for a market?
Creating a market for a product is very difficult compared to creating a product to align with an existing market. What you're trying to do when you create a market for a product is essentially capture or empower a behavior of some kind. So you're trying to not only identify what that behavior is currently or that need, but define what are the actual relationships that need to be formed, what are the means of exchange and value exchange that occur between those relationships, and how to actually introduce a product or a service into that sort of ecosystem to again sort of enhance it in some way. And introducing let's say behavior or needs to people, or to educate a consumer base that sort of wants or recognize the need that they have for a product is a lot more difficult, I think, than actually identifying and satisfying that with the product. So in some cases, we're working on a startup right now. I don't know if I can actually talk too much, but we're working on a product right now in our organization that essentially is tied to the creation of a market first, and then the product that addresses that market need second. And that's taken a very long time to actually go around and talk to all the different stakeholders involved in that market itself and have them all recognize the need, mutually recognize the need for that, and then build the relationships that need to happen in order to sort of introduce that product and have it sort of scale within that marketplace. Is that answer that question? Yeah.
We'll do an exercise first, and then if there are any questions.
Yeah, sure. Do you guys want to start the exercise, or?
Yeah, can you just go through the points, because I know you have to say, what is your product, how are you different from the competition, what is your basic selling point?
Yeah, I
Just go through them quickly so we know what to write.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna write down here. Who's the customer? Who is the customer? What is their need? What is their need or problem that they're facing? How does your solution address that need? Or what is the solution, but how does it address the need? How or why is it different? And then I would add down here, what does it empower, or how does it empower them? And then how does it enable them? Them to participate. I'll do a very simple example right now, on the fly. Let's talk about this microphone. The customer, public speakers, organizations that do a lot of presentations, large organizations that might procure technology like this from a B2B scale, or your everyday consumer. But the everyday individual consumer probably doesn't want to buy a microphone for their home unless they're going to yell at their kids. You might position this product as a way to yell at your kids through your home's intercom system, but typically this would be, I would say, a B2B product. Who's the customer? Large organizations with frequent public speaking events. What is their need? I need a microphone that works, that's small, it's portable. It might also be that it's got to be cheap, I can afford it. It's also serviced in some way. If there's a problem, I can get it fixed. How does the solution address this need? Well, I am providing a microphone at an affordable price for B2B consumers that is also very reliable and robust and comes in at a good price competitive, to other people. What's the big difference? Well, I mentioned price and maybe service, but typically we don't like to compete on price. That's probably the lowest form of competition. And if you commoditize yourself in the market, or if you enter a market that's commoditized, you're in a bad place. Or you need to work on other aspects of your business. So how is it different? Well, you can differentiate by design. It's a very neat little microphone. It's doesn't look like a clunky microphone. It's kind of discreet. It's got some nice angles. So my product is different because of design considerations. It's different because of the technology. Because again, it will be serviced if anything goes wrong, and I can provide you with technology upgrades or recordings and some recordings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Listing off your points of differentiation. What does it empower? Well, it empowers me to come here and speak to you at this volume and this level. It also empowers the sort of idea of mobility within a large setting. It empowers mobility. It empowers me to be able to move away from the center of the room, kind of walk around while I'm talking, and transform my choice to sort of move around and see the outcome of being able to walk over and confront people in my presentation. And how does it enable me to participate? Well, it's enabling me to participate not only in this talk today, but also in this sort of broader conversation here today, which is the TiESep and connecting with you and all these other things. And if I were to say, to come up with a quick value proposition, small but loud. The mic works, small but loud. If we're breaking that down, who is the customer? Again, like I said, is it B2B or is it B2C? Who is that specific person? Well, it's a public speaker or something like that. What is the need? Well, I need this microphone. So if you can follow that template and think about your own business, I know, with you guys and your sort of performance platform.
Choose what you want to have with your coffee.
Yeah, choose what you want to have with your coffee. Yeah. And your customer is the audience or is it the performer?
In this case, it's the
Audience.
audience.
The audience is the customer?
In this case, yeah.
Okay.
The customer is in the definition of who's paying or?
Yeah.
Yes.
Who's buying your product?
The audience.
The audience, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
And how does your solution address the need they have? What is the need they have in the first place?
Here, what we're thinking is, first of all, drinking coffee.
Yeah.
And another is inherent need to be entertainment and to share opinions. People
Yeah.
like to say, you know what, I like that stuff, I don't like that stuff. So something that they can
Is that
vote
need,
on.
are you saying is it affordable social interaction? Is that the kind of the need is to have a coffee, or the need is to interact with people over a drink, or
Yeah, it is somewhat like interaction with people over a cup of coffee or some light snacks. But yes, it is also a platform where both the audience and the performer can interact and share their opinions,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And how is that different? Like, if you think about how that would become different than, going to say a Starbucks or something, or a local coffee shop that's already maybe has a live performance act. How's your brand or your business gonna be different than a local place that does stand up, whatever?
Because you get to choose. You get to choose as in you get to put your opinions. You get to put forward like, okay, I do like this, I don't like this. You know, that part is different. I don't think, not many places have those voting systems other than,
So depending on the demand of the people who are present at the audience, the performers get to perform again and in a larger scale.
So first round, people get opportunity to show their talent for 10 minutes.
Save for the template.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not trying to cut you up, but
No, sounds good. I
we'll
understand.
work on the template. You had your hand was up in the back.
Yeah.
Yes, don't worry, I'll make it brief. I realize this isn't part of the value proposition, but I often think it should be, like at the bottom, that
Yeah.
it should be, and how are you going to make money? Because I think there's often not enough thought placed on that.
That's kind of part of the revenue model and the revenue streams, right?
Right.
It's not necessarily like when you're working on a proposition to a customer, it's maybe how are you going to help them make money? Like, I'm not saying make money, but that's what I'm saying. I think the money statement is empowerment. Like, the way we approach stuff is, making money for your business, of course, is important, but that's part of the idea of how you're going to actually extract revenue from, or extract money from a transaction, from someone interacting with your products. We're talking about, value proposition to that consumer. Maybe your business is about helping them make money in some way. Is that what you're saying, or?
No, I'm saying, like, how are you going to make money? Because often I think that entrepreneurs, they come with a great idea, but there's no really viable business model in it.
Yeah, so that's the next part. This is just the value prop as perceived by the customer.
I think just to expand on that a little bit though, if you think about that video I showed about GoPro cameras, right? They're making a lot of money. They have very interesting sort of cost for production for those cameras. They've got a scale that the market is growing. They've created a proposition to that sort of segment of culture, of society, of extreme athletes, of people that want to aspire to be extreme athletes. A way of actually documenting and empowering themselves and participating in that culture. And they've been able to, essentially, extract revenue from the behavior, which is, extreme sports, high performance, and exhibitionism at some level. How are we looking at, how is that extreme? Who is your extreme athlete? Who is that person in that GoPro commercial that not necessarily is the pro surfer or the guy racing down the hill on a bike at 100 miles an hour, but the person who's looking at that saying, yeah, that's me, I want to kind of be like that. Like, who is that person for you, and where are you sort of looking at, position that value proposition? So if we take like 10 minutes and just sort of figure out, the way I understood this also, you guys are all entrepreneurs at some level or starting up businesses, so I'm sure by now you have a basic idea of who your target customer is, and maybe we sort of put that down and articulate what their needs are, what you feel their needs are, and we can talk about it for a little bit about how to maybe learn more about what those needs are and how to find out better ways of addressing them. Yeah.
So there are different customer segments, right? And so
Yep.
we should have different value propositions for each one of them, right?
Well, that's the thing. You can pick a particular segment. So companies I work for, like PepsiCo, for instance, they have different markets. So there's geographies or regions that have different multiple segments within them. There's a lot of people talk about, share of the wallet. They talk about life stages, gender, different, those kind of things. What I was trying to speak about in my presentation was, maybe not as hardcore business, but looking at more generally, what is a life stage? What is the sort of maybe the geography or the cultural background of an individual and how that might play a role in something? But it's really about who is that person now and who do they want to become? And that's maybe not life stage specific. That's maybe not disposable income specific. Like, someone's values and aspirations are not tied always to income. They're not always tied to geography. People have universal sets of values that you can align a product or a service or business with. And in terms of this concept of social entrepreneurship, especially, that how can you position a product at some level to align with someone's values, not necessarily just their sort of market segment, the definition of their market segment. And then get more specific from there. Yeah. I was going to tell one other story about my engagement ring, actually, or my wedding ring. This is from a local company called Fair Trade Jewelry Co. Very interesting. They're right here in Cabbagetown. I came across them through a mutual friend. I hadn't been searching, honestly. I was not their customer to begin with. I was in the market for an engagement ring or a wedding ring for myself and for my wife. I wanted it to be made by someone, like handmade by someone who could not just purchase per se off. So those are kind of like my criteria, my decision-making criteria was I would like it to be made, crafted. I didn't know that fair trade jewelry existed. I had never actually really considered it. I mean, I had known about mining practices, you know, and all these other things, you know, especially like the concept of blood diamonds, where they're sort of, you know, obviously you've heard of those things, but I never thought about fair trade mining practices. And when I met Ryan, who's the founder of Fair Trade Jewelry Co., he showed me a documentary that he just produced, or that he was working on from Colombia, where they're mining platinum, and he was showing the sort of practice and how it was, you know, unfair to the locals, how there was a lot of environmental, you know, wrong things happening in the environment, a lot of mistreatment of people, like a lot of bad stuff going down. And he, you know, was documenting that. And he said, look, I want to build up this thing, which is fair trade jewelry, which means that these things are ethically sourced from sustainable places. People are getting their fair share of the profits. And he has a B corporation. It's a registered B corp, and there's a triple bottom line there that he has. And for me as a customer, that was the right value proposition to me. It wasn't very, fair trade jewelry was the name of the company, but also the value proposition. It was like, it's all in one, you know, and it's like, oh, okay, now I understand that there's this thing. You know, I'm a customer, you know, 20-something guy who thinks he wants to get married. You know, I need a ring, but I don't know, you know, enough really about it. Tell me about it. You know, this addresses my need for a ring, but it also tells me you're not going to just consume something that was like hurting people or the environment. You're going to contribute to something greater than just this artifact that you're purchasing for yourself. And then how is it different? Well, it's obvious. It's not sourced from anywhere. It's sourced from these very specific places where this individual has a direct relationship with these people. He's able to like communicate this to me, and I get it. You know, and that was a good example of someone who understood that there was a lot of customers out there segment, whether it's, you know, he doesn't just do the engagement ring stuff, he does a lot of other things, but people that buy jewelry and wear jewelry, and they wanted fairly ethically sourced raw materials, you know, and he presented that, and now he's built that actually into it's built up, you know, with other people into a bigger movement of fair trade jewelry and fair trade mining practices, you know, and really, really interesting story. And you know, and for me that empowered me to actually understand that I could contribute to something bigger than just my consumer's consumption of an artifact of a ring, you know, and participate in that culture, that movement of B Corps, which I like, and sustainable business, you know, on a global scale actually. You know, so that was the value proposition from his company, a local small business, to me, you know, as a customer.
Yeah, our cafe is St. Jamestown Cafe, and we provide space and healthy food for the community of St. Jamestown. And in our survey, it showed that a good number of people there would want to have access to good food, healthy food. And our business model was pay what you can. And well, yes, and we had a dozen events and found out that it was not sustainable because we placed a price, a suggested price of $5. But since it was pay what you can, people went there and did pay. We did get that, you know, that price for the food we serve. So even though they want to have access to access to healthy foods, but then I don't know if they cannot afford or what. So I don't know how we're going to do it next time.
Interesting. motivating people to exchange, to create an exchange for a service or a product and the value that's inherent in that. Is there possibly in your model a way of finding alternative ways, alternative currencies? Talk about currencies.
Yes, in fact.
Exchange.
Yes, in fact we have this value time. It's kind of an exchange. It's not money, but it's some kind of volunteer work that in turn they could get some, products from
I've seen
the
also
cafe.
this the ability, not necessarily to buy someone lunch, but the sort of reason for me to take you out for a beer per se, or buy you lunch, is because I might want to have a conversation with you and learn something from you and how we exchange over that. So, is there sort of other models maybe of
Yes, in fact that is our objective, to have a space for conversation and healthy food.
Is it maybe an idea of reducing your costs, perhaps, not necessarily, having to
Yeah.
reducing the cost of the food itself?
Yes, you want to, but the healthy food and organic food
Yeah.
are expensive. So,
No, they are for sure.
I don't know how we can continue with this kind of model.
I can
Does
share
anyone
a
have
story
any-
with you later. Any more questions? Yeah. Please.
Hi, thanks for the talk. So this goes back to your foresight that you do for companies. People usually react to things, so when you talk about things that are going to happen in the future or things that aren't tangible yet, you tend to have this block-off effect. So how do you go about communicating that to your customers or to the clients you have to make them react to something that...
That's a very good question. We like to blend three things. We're going to do, we talk about hindsight, like looking at the past and sort of pointing at answers or lessons that we can say are something that has happened or has occurred this way. From our perspective, this is what the reality was. Talk about insight, sort of present. What can we extract from right now, immediately observable phenomenon or data that we can gather through all the different techniques that I was talking about and other stuff. And then we talk about foresight, which is sort of, if you look at a spectrum, it's like answer to questions, or sort of very clear to the ambiguous. And to get people to sort of buy into or understand or interact with the future. I'm not talking like, we're talking about 2100 and beyond kind of stuff. I'm talking about even just 5 to 7 years down the road as a time frame. We like to sort of point out how other things have evolved, but we also want to paint. We use a lot of techniques like scenarios. We use a lot of illustrations and prototypes and mock-ups, like artifacts, what we call artifacts from the future, or stories, essentially, like you can see in any kind of, not as high resolution as the movies do, but stories that incorporate an element or a narrative of hindsight, a bit of the present, a bit of the past, a bit of the present, and a little touch of the future, so that it's not that it's an unbelievable future, that it's a future that is actually woven from the past. And these sort of artifacts, not only can you interact with them, whether it's a prototype of an actual product or a mock-up of a service experience or a journey that someone might go on, the description of the climate, I'm not talking ecologically speaking, but the business climate or the social climate, those sort of things where if we were to take, like I had that example of that disruptive event, like the Fukushima event that took place, immediately after there was a number of protests around the world, a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty about the future of nuclear energy, the future of energy in general. If we were to sort of show that and talk about, okay, well, where is that going? Do we want to amplify those emotions or amplify those behaviors and create a scenario or image or a scene that actually makes that a little more tangible for someone to say, okay, well, now there's the sort of behaviors, the motivations, the values that exist in that future context. How am I going to develop a product or service that positions itself to align with that? how do I empower people with the tools and resources to deal with that situation? So there's a lot of questions being raised, so we use those artifacts to raise a lot of important questions, and we don't necessarily say that these are predictions of the future. These are models, possible models of the future that you can interact with and apply your own decision-making framework to sort of evaluate and decide whether or not you can sort of jot some insights on it and plan for it, etc. But I think the combination of creating a narrative that's past, present, future is very important. It's not just about hammering someone with the future. I mean, you can do that, but I think most great, a lot of really good future work sort of does always incorporate elements, archetypes, things that are familiar from our past or share collective experiences, something that is familiar so that you can actually be drawn into it. And then, in my job, a lot of the time, it's just gauging the response to these futures. So if I present that as a scenario or as an artifact to somebody, I'm really trying to find out what are their reactions, their expectations, the criticisms they have about it. What does that reveal about their potential, the risk they perceive in something or the potential they see in it and how excited or not they get about it, the barriers they feel that are in the way to achieving that type of future or the things that they feel could actually mitigate that type of future if it's a negative one. We record a lot of that, and that helps kind of inform those questions, and the response to those sort of provocations helps inform the creation of either a plan for now or a value proposition that might emerge with that future down the road.
Matthew, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation.